Hey, it's Dan Kenner with another episode of The Casual Author. Today is Monday, November 20th, 2023, as I record this, and this is episode number 98 of the podcast. Today we're talking to Otto Schafer about the art of switching genres. Now, I've talked to someone about switching genres before, but his story is particularly interesting because he has been writing YA fantasy for the most part and then made a switch to horror. So very interesting switch because those don't always align in time in terms of reader audience. So talk a little bit about his decision in keeping his pen name, going, not trying to separate audiences and create a different pen name, which I've seen other authors do. We talk a little bit about the challenges of that, the pros and the cons, and what he might have done differently if he were to do it again. So you'll want to stick around for that conversation. I think you'll really enjoy it. In terms of updates this last week, a lot of things have stayed kind of stable on the homestead for the most part, with the exception of we did rehome another goat. So we have a goat that we bred last year for the first time. She's one that she was a product of breeding 2 years ago, I believe. She was an excellent goat. Her milk production wasn't as high as we hoped it would be. So this is one of the things is if you're going to be feeding a goat, hopefully there's a good use for that goat. She's very friendly. She's an excellent goat in terms of showmanship. So she actually went to a family who is planning on showing her. Now they do want to breed her and milk her, but they're not really looking for milk production. So we're happy that she found a new home. I think she's going to love it. She's got another group of goat friends that she'll be able to hang out with, but that happened faster than we expected. We put her up for sale a few days ago, and just like that, she was gone. So, um, in terms of other goat news, we are actually at the breeding time now for our goat. So we have a buck, which I have mixed feelings about having a buck. He's very stinky. He was bottle fed, so he's very, very friendly. And if you know anything about bucks, they're very stinky, right? Because not to sugarcoat it, they pee all over themselves. It's an attraction thing. So all the hormones within their bodily fluids apparently attract females, at least supposedly. So there's a period of time from fall to the beginning of winter where it's called rut, where they just pee over everything. Anyway, he's very smelly right now. And I had to accomplish the feat of moving him from his pen into the pen with all of the females. You can imagine that my clothes were not spared that wonderful smell. And the great thing about it is it can take months, sometimes a year to remove that smell, no matter how many times you wash it, because it's just, I guess it's like oils. There's oils in his fur or skin or in the secretions or whatever. And it stays for a while. So I have a specific set of gloves and pants that I reserve for when I need to touch him, which isn't super often, but when I need to clip his or when we need to trim his hooves or, do various other things, and I need to touch him, I just reserve those. Anyway, he's now in there with the girls. At first, there's a lot of headbutting. They don't love it because he goes kind of wild. He's used to it now. I think they've all kind of calmed down. It only took half a day. But yeah, that over the next 3 to 6 weeks, hopefully they'll be bred. And then we'll move him back with his other friend. Currently, the castrated goat that lives in there to be his friend, is happy as can be because he's not being bullied anymore. He's in there with a doeling that was born this year. She's too young to breed. Plus, it's her father. We don't really plan on breeding him to her because genetics. But anyway, so she's over there with him, and they're just happy as can be. Merrick is the name of the weather. But so that was fun. And we did that today. Other than that, we are doing the final prep for winter. We have filled our garbage cans. I swear we need to get a dumpster. There's just a lot of garbage and we're setting up our compost piles, but some weeds we don't want to go in there because some seeds can survive through the composting process. The last thing we want to do is create compost and then spread it on our garden, and then more weeds grow up. So we've been putting those in the garbage along with other, waste and whatnot. So that's always fun. Cleaning up for the winter is a blast. Other than that, we've had two kids start archery this week, and one of our kids is now going into, it's kind of like the belting system for martial arts, black belt, white belt, those types of things. They're called pins. You can, if you achieve certain things, if you get a certain number of points with a certain number of arrows, then you can get what are called pins. So he got his first pin this last week, which is really exciting. He's pretty thrilled about that. He got a high enough score to get his fourth pin, but he can only get one at a time. So that's good. He's pretty set, I think, for his first 4 pins. After that, it gets pretty tricky. He's going to need to do quite a bit of practicing. He's only 9, so we've got time. And then the 8-year-old started archery as well, and he's been having a blast. He's a much better shot than we expected, considering he hasn't really done a lot of shooting. So that's really fun. Really enjoying that. Other than that, just continue with homeschooling. We've moved into the winter schedule, which means my wife is now doing homeschooling in both the morning and the afternoon. During the summer, we mostly just do it in the afternoon because they go out and play. We work out in the yard, just enjoy the fresh air. In the winter, it's a little different. It's a little too cold. Now, we do send them out in the snow. They love the snow. But, it's a little bit more tricky, especially when it's like bitter cold. So they're studying in the morning and the afternoon, and they're just having a blast with that. It's just part of our lives. So that's pretty much it on like Kenner Homestead with the family and everything. Now in terms of writing, I'm still writing Demon Blood. It is the second book of the Hidden Heritage. Once again, this is going to be a 6-book series. I don't know why I do this to myself, but I just feel like writing 6 books. I'm just over halfway through the first draft of that book, which is excellent, having a blast with it. I'm taking a little bit of a detour switch over to a short story. So if you've ever heard of Writers of the Future, it's a novice or an amateur writing competition where you can just write a short story. I think it has to be under 17,000 words, and you submit it, or you can submit them every quarter. Now, I submitted one last quarter for the first time. It was pretty rough. To be completely frank, I don't like editing. It's not my forte. I threw something together, brand new story that came to my head. And, I did some editing on it. It wasn't as clean as I would have liked it to be. Definitely turned it in more of a rougher shape. But I was pleased to hear back that I received a silver honorable mention, which, out of thousands of submissions, that's a really good accomplishment for me. Obviously, I didn't win, but that's all right. So essentially, honorable mention is an excellent achievement. And its silver honorable mention is the higher level of that honorable mention. So it's essentially one step below being a semi-finalist, finalist, that level. So I was pleased with that because I thought it was a really good story, aside from being rough around the edges. I was pretty pleased to get that silver honorable mention. So I'm going to get the certificate, and you bet your bottom dollar I'm going to hang that thing up because, as an author, it can be challenging to have that validation that you're actually writing anything good. So that was encouraging, right, to hear that. So that being said, coming back to why I switched gears, I'm writing another short story. I'm doing it a little bit earlier this time rather than like 2 weeks before the end of the quarter. I'm starting it now. I think I can get it finished by next week. Because of my epic fantasy brain, more than likely it's going to hover around that 17,000 word limit. I'm at about 4,000 words right now, but I'll keep writing through that, and then I'll jump back to Demon Blooded. I'm hoping that even, if I win, excellent, would love that, but I'm hoping that I slip out of the amateur status first before I win that competition. That would be encouraging to me. So pretty much what that means is you can only submit to this competition if you haven't met a certain sales threshold with your books. Now, obviously, I would love to win this competition, validation up the wazoo. But, if I pass the threshold of what they consider professional authorship, then, I wouldn't cry about that either, because that's ultimately my goal anyway. So there would be no complaints. Anyway, just going to write that. I think it helps keep my creative juices going. Plus, it helps me get out these stories that are just in my head. I have so many stories in my head. So it'd be great to just get them out on paper, and they may become prequels to series at some point. I mean, who knows? I think there's a lot that we can do with those. So anyway, I think that's everything in terms of authoring. Oh, the last thing I will say is the Kids of Cyber City. It is the middle grade trilogy that I co-authored with L. Blaze Hughes. That will be published at the beginning of December. I think December 5th is the published date. You can pre-order those on Amazon. They're uploaded to Ingram Spark as well, so they will go live across all other stores in paperback form as well. So if you want to take a look at those, definitely hop over to Amazon. They're attached to my author profile as well as L Blaze Hughes. I'll put a link in the notes. Once again, these are middle grade, and I co-authored this with L Blaze Hughes. Had a blast with it. I think you're really going to enjoy this. Go pick those up when you get the chance. I will be having L Blaze Hughes join me for episode number 100. We're going to do a little bit of a reflection on co-authoring, talk about our experience, the pros and the cons. I really had a blast writing with L Blaze Hughes, and I plan on doing it again. But that's a few episodes away. This is episode number 98. So I believe that's all the episode, or excuse me, that's all of the updates for this episode. So we can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion of the podcast. Hey, Otto, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Doing very well. I am thrilled to pick your brain about genre switching and delving into different things, different audiences, because I've heard it done very differently by different people. But before we dive into all that fun stuff, how long have you been writing and publishing?
So I've been writing since 2016 and publishing since 2019. And I published consistently up until this year, one book a year. And then I published two this year. So, yeah.
Nice. I think that's an excellent track record. So what got you into writing? Is it something that you've been wanting to do your whole life, or?
It is. And I was thinking about this the other day. I have an aunt, a crazy aunt, crazy. And she always wanted to be a writer. And so when I was a kid, we wrote some stories together. And I remember it was almost like this. I kind of remember I must have been like 7 or 8 or maybe 9, but we were trying to write that. It felt a lot like Alice in Wonderland type of story that we wrote. I wish I still had it. I don't know whatever happened to it, but yeah. So maybe I planted the seeds back then. But then I think I tried maybe once while I was raising my boys to start a story and write it. And actually, funny enough, it was going to be a zombie book. That's what I started off. I was going to write that. And then I think I wrote a couple chapters and then never picked it back up. And I believe the computer that I had at the time crashed and I lost that. Yeah. So then I started thinking about, as you do when you get older, my childhood and this town that I lived in, and it's a super nostalgic town. It's called Petersburg, and it's where Abraham Lincoln spent a short period of time while he was studying law, but he held all these jobs while he was there. And he was a boatman on the river that runs through the town. But he also surveyed the streets of Petersburg, and he lived at New Salem, and I worked there when I was a kid. So that very nostalgic, like lots of Victorian homes and bluffs, and it was just this really cool place. And I moved away for work, and I still my heart is still connected to that town. And I started thinking about this story, and I started telling my wife about it, and she said, "All that is like in your head?" And I said, "Yeah, I just think about it. Sometimes I dream about it." And she's like, "You need to write that down." And so, kind of got me going again. And when I started, it just poured out, hot mess of it just poured out. And I think I must have wrote probably the first two books in one big like word vomit. And then I spent from 2016 to 2019 with working with professionals, working with an editor, a team, and going through it and figuring I found this amazing editor, and I've been with her my entire writing career at this point. And we split that book and made book one, which is called The Secret Journal. And a big portion of that storyline takes place in Petersburg with these kids. And that's what got me into YA fantasy and writing that series. And so that's the series I've been working on up until this most recent book.
And now it's done.
And now it's done. It's complete. Feels good.
It's a little weird. It's nice, very satisfying, but at the same time, a little weird to leave some things behind when you've had this story with you for so long.
Yeah. The way that I wrapped on this whole thing is it's a big story. It's a big story. I want to say 2,700 pages for the whole series. And what I found is I wrapped it all up and closed everything out in a what I will say is a very nice, neat package. but I didn't close the door to ever revisiting that because I
Mm.
knew how, that there could be another adventure. And those wheels are spinning in the back of my mind. And there's a lot of folks, I'm blessed that a lot of folks have said to me, "Hey, are you going to ever come back to the Godstone series? Are you going to write any more adventures?" And in that space with those characters, and I've definitely left the door open to do that in a way that didn't leave anything like that story finished, but I have the ability to create new stories. I didn't Harry Potter it and be like, and then Harry was 30 some years old and had two kids, and then end it like we're done here,
Hmm.
as she did. So I left it at a good place, and we can come back and write a new adventure. So because I honestly didn't know how bad am I going to miss these guys, right? How bad am I
Hmm.
going to miss these characters? So I wanted to be able to come back.
I mean, I think that's awesome. I did a similar thing with the trilogy that I wrote. Like they'll leave the last chapter just in case I have some ideas for, different series. And I think that's good. And, then if you don't, it's not like it's going to be weird, the book ending, but at the same time, you have that option.
Right.
You're taking a little bit of I don't know if it's a break or a segue into a different genre currently. I
I
believe
am.
it's horror. Is that right? Horror, zombie, apocalypse type situation.
It is a zombie. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it is a zombie book. It's called Rust Colored Rain. So I told you at the beginning of the interview, right, that I strangely enough started out as in my when I went back to writing in my adulthood, I was going to write a zombie book. I've always wanted to write a zombie book. Um, so yeah, there's a little risk because I have a good following for the YA fantasy series. But even my editor, as I'm going through this series, there's a lot of action throughout the Godstones, and there's some fight scenes, and there's some bloody stuff. But in a YA fantasy, you've got to be careful, right? Like you can chop off a monster's arm, but you don't go describing like in detail this. You just gotta. She would rein me in a little bit, and she would tell me, "You should write a horror book sometime because you're really good at that." That's what she would tell me. So you should do that. And so this is an adult book. I get to swear. I like to swear. That doesn't offend anybody, but I cuss like a sailor. I grew up in construction, and I mean, that's
Hmm.
that's what I do. So I get to cuss in this book, and I feel like when you're being chased by a zombie, there's certain words that are appropriate that most people would say in those circumstances. So I get to do that. But yeah, I got to write this book. It starts off, there's a lot of humor in it. So it starts off with some pretty good fun. It's some average folks. I like that too. That this is a garbage truck driver named Oliver who works, at the city disposal company, and then a nurse. And they go their respective ways in the morning to go to work. They both commute, but they commute in opposite directions. So they're about 30 minutes from home in two bigger cities. They live in a small town in between. And what's fun about this is I try to see how I segue into this, but writing a zombie book and changing genres, for me, authors will often question if that's a good move. Should I do it under a different pen name? Should I not do it at all? Am I going to lose all my readers if I do this? I'm sure I have a lot of fantasy fans that are like, yeah, I don't want to read, horror. Personally, I love zombie stuff and I love fantasy stuff. So I thought, they're not so far apart like if I was writing something totally far away from each other, but these are kind of close. Um, but what I found is, and what I'm listening to people who are posting videos on TikTok, which I'm so appreciative of, and I'm telling you, the last couple of weeks I've just been filled with gratitude for all the videos that people are posting talking about this book. And what I'm finding is it's really about the characters.
Hmm.
More than anything, it's about the characters. If you can write compelling characters that people can invest in and fall in love with, it doesn't matter if they're zombies or magic, wizards, dragons. It really, for the most part, they have to love the characters. And I think going back to this couple, their marriage is on the verge of collapse. One of them is keeping a secret from the other one, and the other one knows there's something wrong. And this is a marriage that is really in turmoil. And we start in this place where they're getting out of bed after a huge fight the night before, and she's just convinced that he's doing the worst thing you could do to your spouse, right? Cheating. And there's just this awful, she has this awful feeling. She knows that's what's going on. He's clearly keeping a secret. Is it that he's cheating? Has he cheated? So you've got this underlying story that the readers get invested in right away. Like, what is this? Is he a dirtbag? Am I going to hate this guy? What is going on with this? And they go there for, their prospective ways to work. Um, and the zombie apocalypse hits, and they spend a good portion of that book trying to get back to each other, trying to get home to safety as the world just gets thrust into turmoil. And I don't mind telling you that what happens, because it's on the back of the book. I mean, it happens in the. I tell you, it hits fast. There's an asteroid that is on a collision course with Earth. You would think we'd know about this, but something has happened where, for whatever reason, we don't know. And the government waits to the last possible moment to tell us, hey, emergency broadcast, an asteroid's about to enter our atmosphere. Don't panic. We've got this under control. We're going to use, we've teamed up with other nations, and we're going to, we've planned for this, and we're going to push the asteroid out of the way. So it, pushes it back out, and everything's okay, but expect to lose power, expect bright, aurora borealis type lights in the sky, blah, blah, blah. Which makes everybody panic, right? Everybody freaks out. And then there is the explosions in the sky over the Americas, and the flashes and power outages, and cell phones go down. And but strangely, the asteroid just disintegrates, and the sky fills with these red clouds, and it begins to rain, this rust colored rain. And everybody's elated, dancing in the streets. Yay, go USA. All the things you can imagine would happen. People are just, everybody gets to live. Yay. But what they don't know is the apocalypse is yet to come. So, and that's kind of how everything starts out. We go from there.
I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. It's interesting to hear the themes, and obviously this is an adult couple and marriage turmoil is very different themes from a YA fantasy. So I think it's great as authors that we have the ability to, compartmentalize our minds so that we can write in these different genres. But I am curious to know what the reaction was. It sounds like I get what you're saying. I agree with you that I think, a lot of the aspects of this horror apocalypse novel can be liked by a lot of people that also like fantasy. But I'm kind of curious about the YA to adult shift, because I mean they're quite different, obviously, in content and in the themes and the words, the language that you're putting in there. Are you finding that a lot of your audience is not sensitive to that? Are they happy to be like, oh yeah, this is because they're quite different in terms of themes?
Knock on wood. I haven't had anybody complain yet.
Yeah.
I feel like
that's good.
you look at the cover and understand it's a zombie apocalypse horror flick kind of book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you should somewhat know what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you're gonna get zombies, and you're gonna get death, and you're gonna get all those things. Now, yeah, there is swearing in it. There is no there's no spice, there's no sexual content really in the book. So we don't have that. Not that there's. I just got my first spicy book the other day, and I'm excited to read it. So, a friend on TikTok. So yeah, I'm super pumped for it. But yeah, nothing wrong with that. Just not something I'd be confident enough to write really at this point in my career. But I definitely applaud those who can. And yeah, so there's no spice, but yeah, there is adult content in that. It's probably a bit gorier. We get into the science behind what's happening, why they're turning in. Like, she's a nurse. She's actually a nurse practitioner, so she's pretty close to a doctor. So I get to really get into her mindset of what's going on, because that's her mechanics in her mind. That character's mind are going to want to know, like, what is causing it, what's safe, what's not safe, how does it spread. That's going to be something that somebody in that doctor field is going to want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I get to get into that. So no, it's been great, and it's been really well received, even from folks who said to me, never read a zombie book before, and you've got me. I'm hooked on these characters. I want to know more. When's the next book coming? And I love it. So I'm so
well. I mean, I think what you said is very interesting, particularly if you're joining TikTok. You learn a little bit more about readers and kind of what they're looking for. And yeah, the characters piece of it definitely rings true. because there's a lot of people that just get very invested in characters and their lives, and they are more willing to jump into content that maybe they're not used to reading, or something maybe they don't prefer, because they're invested in these characters. I am curious to know why you decided not to go with a pen name. I mean, I think it's great. It's working. It seems to not be a problem, but I know there's a lot of authors that do decide to go with the pen name. So what were the deciding factors for you in keeping your name and the audience?
You mean not changing my name from this
Cor-
series to another?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Keeping your same pen name for this one
Yeah, yeah. I was
versus.
gonna say this is a pen name, but it's also, Otto Schafer is my middle name and my last name. So,
Mhm.
um, but I didn't change it. Here's the thing: I was confident that my readership would carry over. You're not 100%, not 100%. But if I'm being honest, my YA fantasy is not read mostly by teens or kids. It's read by
Mhm.
adults.
Yeah, it's true.
Um, I mean that's who's reading my books. It's mostly female. It's mostly adult females who are reading my YA fantasy series.
Mhm.
Not that guys don't. They do, but I'm just saying that's where the majority is, right? So I didn't have a real concern that I would lose a lot of readership. Yeah, I don't want a 12-year-old really reading this book unless their parents are really comfortable with them reading adult content and all the swear words and cuss words and some gore. But it's certainly no one younger. I mean, it's the parents' decision, but I would be quite comfortable with a 12-year-old reading the Godstone series. However, that is a teen banter. There's a lot of teen banter in the Godstones where some I will call it light cursing is uh is in those books as well.
Fair enough.
So even though it's under the young adult, I mean there is some cursing in there too. Now it's not a lot, it's not all the time, but I'm just telling you, teen boys when they're away from mom and dad tend to
Mhm.
swear, right? At
Yeah.
least, and I raised three boys, so I tried to keep it real to what those characters would be doing from that. They're 15 to 17, almost 18 years old. They're swearing, so there's some of that in there too. I think the only difference here is it's the F bomb is definitely dropped more frequently, and it is a bit bloodier, a bit gorier.
Well, if it wasn't, then I don't think it would be very genre aligning.
Right.
At least
Exactly.
I would think. I haven't admittedly read a lot in the genre, but it doesn't surprise me that I feel like if you left those elements out, it would feel too unrealistic. It wouldn't really align
Yeah.
with people's expectations who generally read in that. But I mean, I think it's great that you took the leap. You didn't change your pen name from series to series. You're keeping running with it, and I don't think that's a problem. Uh, it really just depends on. One thing that I think you said, the genres are kind of close enough. It might be a little bit different if someone is writing, say, YA fantasy, and then they dive into like erotica or really, sexually explicit series. That, I would find that
Yeah.
there would be more grounds to have a different pen name to separate those two, because you don't want to accidentally or inadvertently cross audiences who aren't, accepting of that. But, in this case, I
Right.
think it's just aligned enough that, preferential people can be like, I don't want to read that. I still support Otto. I like his books in this way. I can keep following him. Or they can say, yeah, I'll give it a try, right? It's not something I normally read, but I like Otto as an author. I like this series, so we'll give it a go. And it seems like that's what people are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so, and I think that's a really good kind of summary of my logic there. And I'll continue to, I'm going to write the next. I'm going to finish this is going to be a trilogy, and then I do have, and it may not be after, it may be during, because I've written a pretty good chunk of this. As you know, when you're waiting on editors and you're doing your book goes off to be edited, you have this time. I continue to write. I'm working on something different. I've had a lot of time to work on this psychological thriller.
Hmm.
The difference here is there's no really there's no magic, there's no um, zombie, that type of stuff. It's very realistic. It's going to be a serial killer, um, and I've written a big chunk of this, and I think it's going to be the most challenging for me
Mm-hmm.
potentially. Um, I'm about, I'd say probably about 100 pages into it. I don't know what that is, like 30,000 words maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I am absolutely loving it. It's dark. It's there'll have to be some trigger warnings on it. It's a little bit more, just with some of the serial killer rapist stuff that he, that so I'm gonna have to be careful there, realizing that, but I'm also not gonna change my pen name for that. But I'll put the warnings in. And we'll see how that plays. But I know there's a few people excited for that kind of mystery psychological thriller.
Well,
I'm well, I think it's gonna be great.
it sounds like you're being very forward with it with your readers, though, about your works in progress. Say, hey, I'm doing this. You're giving a little bit of a forward notice, other than dropping and saying, hey, here's this book. Not enough information about it. Go take a look at it. I can see that's where maybe some confusion might come in. But if you're frank with your audience and the people that are
Yeah,
following, you say, hey, this is the direction I'm taking for some of the series. I'm not giving up YA fantasy necessarily. It's just, we're going to try a couple of these other things, going to keep the name. I think that works out perfectly. I think it's that transparency and communication which really make the difference. And I imagine you probably don't want to manage two separate pen names. I've
no,
heard
I
that
really don't.
it's a lot of extra work, and I don't know
Yeah,
if I want to commit to that, but
you
some
have to
people are fine
rebuild
with
so
that.
much, right? Rebuild followings, rebuild all your yeah, and it just seems like it's like I don't want to start over and
Mm-hmm.
like coming from this unknown place. Look, Stephen King can write anything and everybody's going to buy it because Stephen King's his own brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would really like to I want to really focus on characters. And I feel like I can write across now, maybe, obviously not to that level, and obviously maybe not that wide of a breadth across genres. But I feel like I'm confident now after this that I can write in multiple genres. And it's I want what I hope, right, is that my readers are like, it's about the characters. They know when they read my work, they're gonna get invested in the characters. That's what I want to be. If I was going to be known for something, that's what I want. That's what I want, right? Is I want you to know when you read one of Otto's books, you're going to get sucked into that character piece. And with that upcoming book, which has got some really great twists in it, that psychological thriller, again, I'm falling in love with these characters as I write them, and I'm just like, man, I'm stoked on it, right? It's kind of the same that happened with the zombie book too, and I've already started the next book for that one and started writing it really just this last week, and I'm pumped for where it's going. I'm not a plotter. I don't sit down and plot out my books. I didn't do it with my series, and it turned out fabulous. And I tried. I did. I said, okay, let me do this. Let me sit down and write out a plot. So I wrote out about 15 chapters. 3 chapters later, I was so far away from I was like, yeah, that was a waste of my time. So I just gotta let it take me where it takes me. Here's what I'll say about plotting. I think we all do it. I think we all plot. Even when we say we're, pantsers or discovery writers, I would classify myself there, but I'm also driving to work every day and I'm thinking about my scene and I'm like, where's it? Oh, and then all these, ideas, or I'm out on a run or whatever. And I'm plotting in my mind forward. And then when I get to sit down, I have that loose plot trajectory. I also knew where my Godstone series ended at. That scene was in my head for years, where it was all going to end. So, I typically will know like where a chapter ends and I write my way to the ending of that chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it works for you. I'd be curious, but that's for me. I visualize it and I don't know what's going to get me to that point, but I'm like, by the end of this chapter, this is where I'm going to be at.
Mm-hmm.
And that's 90% of the time that's accurate in my thought process.
Yeah,
10% of the
definitely.
time my characters surprise me, I guess, but
Like, yeah, maybe the character surprising piece of it. That's generally how I write. So I agree with the whole generally people are it's a spectrum, right? Plotting,
right.
pantsing, or discovery writing, whatever you want to refer to it as. I then tend to be leaning more towards the pantser discovery writing side of things as well.
Yeah.
I do think about my books as often as I can, and it kind of sounds similar to you, where I have some kind of idea. I come up with these ideas while I'm doing dishes or working with the animals or whatever. I don't write any of them down though. My mantra
Yeah.
is if I don't remember it in the moment when I need it, then it's not meant to be in the book, which I know drives some people crazy, but that's just how it works for me. I've thought of hundreds of ideas. I'm like, oh, that would be really cool. And then I don't remember them. So I don't worry about it. It's just like they didn't come up. They're not meant to be in the story. But I don't really know how my chapters are going to end. I'm surprised constantly. Like, huh, there are so many instances where there's characters that, I was like, maybe this person will die or maybe this person will, disappear. And then suddenly
Hmm.
something happens. Like,
Yeah.
I guess they're sticking around for a while. That's happened to me a lot of times. But for me, it really comes down to the intuition piece of it. I have a sense of what chapter endings I like, and so it just feels natural to end a chapter either with a
Yeah.
cliffhanger or with like a big reveal or something. Um, it just feels natural to me, and it helps lead
Yeah.
into the next chapter, even if I'm not quite sure where to go. Generally, with my books, less so with the books I'm writing right now, but with the Lightbearer Chronicles that I wrote, I did have, maybe a handful, 3 to 5 scenes that were kind of checkpoints throughout the series, but I didn't know
Right.
when they were going to be. I just knew that I wanted to have those scenes in there at some point. And so as I wrote, just like, oh, here we are. This is kind of this idea that I had for this scene. And then I'll write through it. And then it's unknown again until I get to that other checkpoint scene. So I don't know if that's rings a bell with you, if that's how you handle it as well.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't write anything down, pre-write anything down. When I write, I'm writing. There's no,
Agreed.
and I think that's accurate too. I've been on runs in the woods and I do a lot of trail running and I've done some ultra marathoning, and so
Wow.
I'll get out there and really the wheels start churning and I'll think of a lot of things. And you're right. I mean, if I don't remember it, it doesn't go in there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's accurate. And I won't say I know where every chapter ends at either. I mean, at some point, though, probably as I'm writing the chapter, I'll be like, "Oh, okay, here's where we're going. Here's what we're going to get to,"
Sure. Yeah.
um, and then I'll know. And I think the natural place to stop. Like, I don't end every chapter on a cliffhanger, but I end a lot of them on cliffhangers. And I write. So I
Mm-hmm.
also have a certain style that I've applied to my Godstone series and to Rust Colored Rain, and a, a lot of people like it. I'm sure there's people who don't, but I am in one chapter, and this isn't a hard fast rule. I could do 2 chapters in one POV, but for the most part, I'm alternating POVs between the husband and the wife as we go through the story. And then in the Godstone series, the characters there's a male and a female that are both um, stars of the show, and I alternate between them. And then I do hit some other POVs in that series because it's such a big epic. But so yeah, I'm always like, I might bring you up to the edge in this chapter, and then you flip the page and you're on a different POV in
Mm-hmm.
a different part of and you're like, and then you got to
Mm-hmm.
read through that, and then you go back, and so I do a lot of that. I think that actually, builds the suspense of a cliffhanger when you do end a chapter there. But you also can't end every chapter on a cliffhanger either. It's just it loses its punch when you do that. So you have to be selective,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a for me that feels natural on when and how to do that
I agree.
depending on
Actually, it
circumstances.
sounds like we write in very similar ways because I do that as well. That has actually been particularly challenging for me because I have done this before. One of my books is first person from one perspective throughout the whole thing. It's just different. It's very different. You have to write a very different way. Um, it really depends. I do prefer the POV switching type thing. All of my epic fantasies are definitely have anywhere from 3 to 8 different POVs, depending on
Yeah.
the book that we're talking about. So that's the type of stuff I like, the switching per chapter. So, and it sounds like your YA book is that way as well, which I think is
Yeah, it
awesome.
is.
A lot of YA isn't that way. So, definitely makes me more excited to take a look at it and dive in and read it. So
Yeah.
sounds really fun to me. So for you, now that you're kind of diving into this psychological thriller, you've got this horror zombie apocalypse, you've got your YA fantasy. How are you charting out, or are you charting out your author writing schedule? Are you just going to kind of bounce around to different genres? You're going to try to
Mm.
keep it to specific ones? I guess what are your plans moving forward?
Yeah, I do understand and believe that an author working on a series has an accountability to the reader to do their best to get the next book out, right? So I get frustrated with authors that I read when I read book one and book two, and then I'm waiting on book three, and that author goes over here and starts this, and I'm like, why did you do that? I'm waiting on, I can't stand it.
Brandon
Um,
Sanderson. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
exactly. Thank you. Um, yeah, I was going to name some more, but we don't even need to. We get the idea. So
Yeah.
I have an obligation, right? And even though I dabbled with other stuff while I was doing Godstones, I was consistent,
Hmm.
right? Because I wrote a lot of the zombie book while I was finishing the last book and going through edits and different things. But when that edit came back, nose to the grindstone, I'm back
Yeah.
on that book, right? Because I owe it to get that done.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna be the same way with the zombie. I mean, people are already saying to me, like, look, this isn't a hard read. This is about 70,000 words. So it's the shortest book I've written, but it it allowed me to be like take everything I've learned from that Y series and just really give a fun, punchy, gory, give you all those things in a nice package that doesn't take you, you know, 2 3 weeks to read, or you don't have this huge commitment. So people were banging this thing out in like a day and then posting up and saying, hey, Otto, when's the next book coming? And I'm like, yeah. Right. So I am writing the next book and I will continue to do that. I will get this trilogy done. I will potentially I'll release that psychological thriller somewhere in here if it doesn't interrupt me being accountable to this story, right?
Hmm.
So if that happens, great. If not, it'll come out after. So you're asking me about plotting out my books. So trilogy with the Rack and Ruin series, psychological thriller standalone, and then after that, maybe I want to go back and revisit my characters in Godstones. I don't know. I have other ideas. I have nothing else started though. But I have other ideas churning. So it's hard to say, kind of like my writing. We'll figure it out as we go along, right? But
Hmm.
that's what I know. That's as far out as I can see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. So not that I had any level of expectation that you would have in this year, I'll write this and this and this. I was just
Mhm.
curious because I know
Yeah,
I didn't know if you'd be delving to, well, maybe someday I will also write. I mean, you mentioned spicy, maybe erotica, maybe you'll dive into other types of thrillers. But maybe those aren't in the cards. You've got some
yeah,
buckets that you're working with, so maybe you'll stick within those lines for a little while. I'm the same way. I have unlimited stories in my
yeah,
mind that is
yeah,
just like, well, what's next? I try to write because I'm a discovery writer and I don't write anything down. If I have an idea that I might want to turn into a book later, I don't actually like writing down the idea. For me, that just doesn't work because when I come back to it, it's not going to sound as cool. So I actually will just write the first few pages or first chapter of a book. That's easier for me to remember where I was going with it to come back. So I have, a couple of them from, years ago that maybe I'll write someday, maybe I won't. But um, yeah, I don't know where I'm going really either. I have a 6 book series that I'm working on right now and then I have another 4 book epic fantasy series that's in flight, but there's no plans to really publish any of them right now. It's just mainly writing them down. I'm kind of considering a rapid release type schedule for my own sanity more than anything, just so that I can get them done and not worry about it. Never tried that before, so we'll see how it goes.
that's I'd like to see how that goes too. It's nice. I mean, you're talking like every 3 months or every 6 months dropping a
Probably
book.
every
Yeah, that'd be
probably
good.
every 3 months, yeah.
Yeah,
So getting all the first drafts written, and then as I'm releasing the first one, doing the edits and cleanup of the other ones, and releasing them consecutively. We'll see how it goes, but
I think
just
it's smart. I think that's smart. I think it takes incredible patience
yeah,
with yourself to not want to get it out there, right? That
yeah,
first book, like that would have been good with this zombie trilogy, right? Because I plan all these books are going to fall somewhere between 70 and 90,000 words. I don't want them to be really long books. I
hmm,
don't want them to be huge investments. I want them to be a fun story that people can knock out, right? Because people like that too.
yeah,
I've got some big thick boys if somebody wants those, right? They're there. So we've got the thick books, but I wanted something a little bit, more manageable for the readers who want to bang out a book fast.
hmm.
So that's kind of what I'm doing. But it would have probably been smart to hold Rust Colored Rain, write the next two, and do a rapid release. But man, I don't know. I don't have the patience, and I talked about it too much, and so people were expecting it at that point. So I had
Well, I
to
mean, I think that's
had to
fine.
deliver.
I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it
No,
necessarily, because particularly because you're consistent, right? You are,
yeah,
it's not like you're doing what some authors do where they publish the first one and then they get busy or something happens, then it's 10 years before they publish the next one. So I think in
yeah,
your case, it's not a problem to publish the first and get to the second one because you do have that consistency. Um, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see if I may not be patient enough to wait. I don't know. I've never tried it. I've only written the first and half of the second. So we'll see if I can make it through 6 books. That's a lot of books to be patient for. It
So
would be
so you have one left in the series you're working on? Well, you have
and,
5 books now, right?
and so actually no, there's it's kind of funny. I have five books. It's a trilogy with a prequel that's published. That's completed. And then there's a standalone book that I published within there. It's just like a
Oh, okay.
YA sci-fi dystopian type book. So they're not related. That one was it was kind of like you said, like your psychological thriller. I just got this idea. It didn't disrupt the trilogy I was writing, so I published it in between. It just kind of worked out that way.
No, that makes sense.
No, so the 6 book series is a YA fantasy. It's like a portal fantasy series, and then the other one is an epic fantasy. Not Stormlight Archive level, but as I was reading through, I have a writing group, and they're like, "This is approaching that complexity." I'm like, "Yeah, it really is." So I've had the first book completely written. I'm just too afraid to edit it because editing is just
Yeah.
not my favorite. So at some
Yeah.
point, I need to put on my big boy pants and just actually start editing it because it's a massive endeavor. But that's where I am right now with my writing.
Do you self-edit then your
Uh,
books? Or do you?
I self edit and get professional editors. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do both,
Good.
but
Yeah.
it's a complicated process.
It
I'm not
is.
a
Yeah.
great editor. So, but in any case, this has been an excellent conversation. We are running short on time. Before we end here, where can people find more information about you and your books?
So yeah, ottoschafer.com is my website. I need to get Rust Colored Rain uploaded into there so people can see it. But the Godstone series is in there. Also, I mean, mostly TikTok. I get a lot of. I have a pretty not a sizable following that you have, but I have a decent following on TikTok, and I'm very active. I post daily. So if you really want to see what I'm up to, TikTok's probably the best place. I do post a lot of that content over onto Instagram, but I don't, I have a decent following there, but it's not as we'll say engaging, right, as TikTok has been. I
Mhm.
also have a TikTok shop where you can get book boxes of all my books. So you can get Rust Colored Rain and what I'm coining a zombie box, which comes wrapped in bloody paper, and it comes with stickers and bookmarks, and it's a really cool box. And people have been posting videos of that book box, which I'm grateful for. And then you can get all my Godstone series individually through the Talk Shop, or you can get them discounted as a full package of all 5 books in a book
Nice.
box. So yeah, I reduced the price quite a bit, which ends up coming out to like those books sell for $25 a piece. I think if you buy like all 5 of them in that box with bookmarks and stickers and all that fun and a map, fantasy map, I think it comes out to be like $17 a piece or something like that. So I mean,
Oh,
it's a pretty good
not bad.
deal. So yeah, that's all in the TikTok shop. And if you don't do TikTok shop or don't want to buy through there, I do have a Google form link through my Instagram and my TikTok that you can also get them dealing directly with me through PayPal. So a few options there. And of course, everything's on Amazon. And I should mention the Godstone series is also available on Audible. It's been
Nice.
professionally produced, and the narrator is amazing. It seemed that no matter what kind of crazy character, like a 3-headed dragon or a giant that's voice sounds like he's gargling gravel, there's nothing this guy couldn't do. And
Awesome.
includes all the female voices. I mean, he's amazing. So yeah, I've got all of those out there as well.
That's great. I like all the options. It makes it so people can find them however they'd like to.
Yeah,
But well, thank you for your time. This has been amazing.
yeah. Thank you.
All right. I hope you found that as interesting as I did. Otto is a very inspiring person. I really liked his positivity and his approach to authoring as well as genre shifting. I don't plan on switching genres at any time. I have plenty of sci-fi and fantasy stories in my head. I just need to build up my courage to write more sci-fi because for some reason it overwhelms me. But I don't intend on switching my pen name like Otto. So hopefully I'll take a page from his book and find success in that as he has. So next week for episode 99, we'll be talking to Nick Fletch about the technical aspects of authoring. He's done a lot of research about the ins and the outs, the pros and the cons of plotting and the most effective ways of plotting, which is very insightful for someone who does not plot. We have a lot of discussion about his experience in writing some of his first books, which didn't do as well, and then moving through a lot of workshopping with beta readers and writers groups to get his next book, which just published recently, into a much better shape. So I think you want to join us for that conversation. We will have a blast with that. If you'd like to join me on the podcast, definitely head to thecasualauthor.com, fill out the pitch form there. I'd love to have anybody or everyone join me. There's a lot to talk about and a lot of people who are wanting to listen. So if you learned something today, definitely like and share the podcast. Or if you just want to share with other authors who are looking for positive inspiration, I would really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much, and I hope you have an excellent week. See you next week.